This audio recording may not be reproduced without the express written permission of Robert Toporek. If Robert has passed, please contact the Rolf Institute about the use of this audio recording. The state of balance or imbalance in our bodies, its relationship to gravity, is reflected in behavior states, since self-expression is intimately involved with muscular tonus. Balance might be thought of as a resting state, a capacity and preparedness for responses of all kinds depending on the nature of the stimulus. Imbalance, then, is a response itself, the movement or impulse to movement, which completes by a return to balance when the response has been spent itself. But our lives are such that many responses never do complete themselves. Children, for example, may continually be shrinking away, lowering their head, raising their shoulders, and depressing their chest until the pattern becomes a norm for them. Or they may, like a racer waiting for a starting signal that never comes, build tension in their legs through an unfulfilled impulse to run away. The muscular tension and the behavior are two aspects of the same organic pattern. Dr. Rolf. Addendum. However, we are not born in balance or structurally integrated. Therefore, our bodies and lives remain in what could be called habits and patterns. Life begins to reinforce these patterns. By Rolfing babies at an early age, we can create a new pattern of structural integration. If we wait more than a year, we first have to work on the reinforcements. The older we become, the more ingrained are the patterns. However, Dr. Rolf distinguished that the body is a plastic medium and can be changed at any age. Robert Toporek, an advanced certified Rolf practitioner since 1975, who worked and studied extensively with Dr. Rolf the last 4 years of her life, and is pioneering the promise of Rolfing for babies, children, and families. Hi, I'm Robert Toporek. I began to study with Dr. Rolf in 1975. You can do the math of how long I've been doing it. And I got to work with her extensively over the last 4 years of her life. And her last year of life, she wanted to do a project on promoting the benefits of Rolfing for babies and children, so she asked me to put it together, and I did. A lot of it was audio tape. I'm working on sorting through those audio tapes because there are some powerful conversations that will be part of a audio package I'm putting together that will help support my work with babies and children, especially babies and children of low-income families with children with developmental problems. So enjoy this video or this audio talk, and feel free to share it with anyone you want.
We'll reconvene around 1 o'clock for Dr. Rolf's opening address.
I won't have to talk at all. This will feel good. At any rate, as you know, part of a speaker's job who's on this part of the program is to welcome you. I don't think I need to welcome you. You've welcomed me so well that I know that you are the hosts and I am the guest. So consider yourself properly welcomed and by yourselves, who are the essential people for whom this place exists. I hardly need to tell you that it's also part of one of the early guest speakers to tell you what a beautiful place you have. I think you will know that I'm not exaggerating when I tell you how much impressed I am with this place. And I would like very much to publicly thank all of the people who have exerted themselves endlessly to make this place not only a possibility, but a beautiful possibility. And it is such a joy to come into this home of ours and see so many beautiful things, beautiful. Somebody said to me, the carpet on the floor is the right shade. It's not just any shade of green, it's the right shade of green. And this is what I'm talking about. I want, as I say, to have the opportunity of expressing, and I think also on your behalf, to Anna and to Dick and to the unnumbered other people who have put effort into this place, our thanks for the wonderful gift that they've given us this time round. Bob Toporek, whom I'm sure everybody knows, Bob Toporek said to me one day, you know, when I have to speak, I talk about Rolfing. And he says, when you speak, you talk about structure. And I said, yeah, that's right. Which ones do they seem to like to hear about most? And he said, structure. So, accordingly, in order to preserve my reputation, I'm going to have to do a little talking about structure this afternoon. And the reason I am talking about structure this afternoon, aside from Bob, who always manages to give me reason for something pleasant, the reason I'm talking about structure this afternoon is that still so many of you who are Rolfers and who are established Rolfers say, I cannot think what to tell people when they ask me, what is Rolfing? And I know just how they feel because I felt that way for a great many years myself. In fact, I still feel that way many times. But in terms of the word in terms of a single unit, single word answer, structure is as good a word as any in the dictionary that I know of. Because we, believe it or not, we are the experts in structure in this or any modern culture that I know of. Has it occurred to you that you are the experts, and as far as I know, there are no others? There are a lot of people who will talk about structure, but there are no other people who so deliberately organize structure and view it in terms of its environment. Somebody's going to say, who was trained in osteopathy or chiropractic, but there are people that are dealing in structure. There are osteopaths, there are chiropractors. That is true. And these people were the people who introduced the idea of structure. Now, you people, most of you, are actual practitioners, I fancy. And you, well, I suspect there are a few friends here too. I hope they're friends. At any rate, what I have to say is that as practitioners, probably every once in a while, you stop and think to yourself, I wonder what this is basically that I am doing. What is Rolfing? Why does it work? Why does it have such a good reputation for working? Why does it work, I don't know, 90% of the time? There are no other ways of dealing with human bodies that work that with such consistency and with such assured success as Rolfing. Why is this? And the answer is, let me whisper it to you. The answer is because you are dealing with structure. Now, think of this for a bit. 100 years ago, when somebody came to you ill, you looked for a medicine. You looked for something that you gave him a spoonful 3 times a day and expected it to work. And if you were a thoughtful person, you thought about, wonder what that is on that spoon that I'm giving him and why does it work? And many times, you see, the answer was that what was on that spoon was so different in terms of material from the body that it was supposed to heal, that it looked like magic. Because actually, in the old magic, as you know, you took something completely alien, a frog that died in the moonlight if the moonlight happened to be full on the 9th of the month. And I am not fooling. You see, if you look at this closely, you can see where our medicine came from in terms of even a substance which had the reputation of always making your stomach ache better, or a headache better, or something of the sort. These were still very alien structures, and we did not understand, and in many cases we still don't understand, what is the constituent in those particular structures that give us the healing action. Now, that is what I feel as I work. As I work, I feel a dichotomy. I feel around me an old medicine and a new medicine, or therapy if you prefer the term. And the old therapy, the old medicine, worked with this curious reliance on magic, if you want to call it that, on a something alien that you introduced into a body in order to get a result which would be beneficent. And I don't need to tell you, you were all brought up on a spoonful of this and a spoonful of that. You were all dosed on rhubarb and soda when you had a stomach ache, and a lot of other things. Oh, don't forget castor oil. And this, you see, is the remains of that method of thinking. And then an odd thing happened. It waited till the last quarter of the 19th century to happen. Some men came down the pike, and one of them in particular noticed that when somebody was ill, his physical structure changed. His name was Andrew Taylor Still, as I'm sure many of you know, and he became the father of the group that calls themselves osteopaths. Seemed a curious name for them and rather inept, but that's beside the point. The osteopaths were the ones who first saw that structure has something to do with health, with well-being, with good function. Many people realized that structure and function, that there was a relation between them. But people did not realize that in altering structure, you immediately, you didn't wait for a week to see what was going to happen. You immediately started a different function going. And then one day, Still was an old country doctor. If I remember rightly, he lived in Kansas. And he was an old country doctor, doctoring horses if he didn't happen to have men that had stomach aches or something of the sort. And a general all-around man who looked at symptoms, man who looked at what is necessary to bring this along. Just a good old guy. And then one day there came along a fellow by the name of Palmer, and he said to Still, I want to learn your system. So Palmer, so the story goes, Still, as the story goes, took him into his house, and he kept him there as a young student for quite some time, some months, I think, until Palmer felt that he knew everything that Still knew, and he probably knew, being Palmer, he probably knew a little more. So one fine day, Palmer didn't appear for breakfast, and when they went to his room to look for him, He was gone, his clothes were gone, everything he had, all trace of him was gone, and that was the end of that story. But Palmer was an aggressive guy. He was an aggressive guy, and he went out and he gathered together like-minded individuals who would come to him, to whom he taught the principles that he had learned from Still. And then, of course, as you all know, as you learn principles, various little deviations come in here and little deviations come in there. And presently you have something that is deviating from the original. And so it was with these chiropractors who called themselves chiropractors in order to make it apparent that they were working with their hands as therapy, for therapy. Now, at that time, you see, we began to have something that was other than magic. We began to have something that belonged in the body, belonged to the body, that we called on for help with the body. And a little, people came along with eyes sharpened by these observations that Still had made. And they came in and they introduced the two best known of, well, there are a lot more than two, but the best known of them, of course, are osteopathy and chiropractic. And there's naturopathy. I do not mean naturopathy, I mean naturopathy, and it may be that some of you do not know that there is a cult in Chicago that very much resembles Rolfing in its own way, that are manipulators of the body and do look at structure. So what are we doing here? Why are we celebrating the fact that we're a bunch of Rolfers that we're gathered together here and we think we're great? What did we ever do to justify that idea? Just one thing. We began to find that we had to take, in order to get results, we had to take into consideration the field of gravity. Now that is the only thing that takes and sets us apart from the various other methods around the world of healing by hand. We found that in order to get true healing, permanent healing that next week had not flown, we had to take into consideration gravity, the field of energy in which we live. Now, it took quite a while before people began to understand that the field of gravity was a field, that the gravity that they were depending on was a field of energy. And that they had, if they were going to get any sense out of what they were doing, they had to begin to look at human beings as smaller fields of energy. And that those smaller fields of energy were acted on by the greater field of energy, and that now this began to make sense, because if you've got that greater field of energy, and you have a smaller field which is not in alignment with it, or which does not bear certain relationships to it, that greater field is going to break down the smaller field. It's going to tip, it's going to do this, that, or the other thing. And it is certainly not going to be of any therapeutic value. And this is what people were beginning to find out. And this, you see, is where you're coming in. You are beginning to find out that in order to get support from the energy field of the earth, you have to be essentially vertical. And many of you have heard me say this before, and some of you possibly have seen it in my book, that the verticality you see, that we find serving us at the surface of the earth, is vertical only because the field around the earth, the energy field around the earth, is so vast that to us, as small bits of it, it seems to be vertical for a short period, for a short space around the surface of the earth. Now, as I said before, you can give this lecture to your patients, see whether they understand it, when they ask you, what is Rolfing? But the fact of the matter is, you see, that you have to make them recognize the fact that a man is not a man in the Aristotelian sense in the eyes of a Rolfer. For 2,000 years, we have thought of a man as a unit. But Rolfing is beginning to say, if you think of a man as a unit, you are not able to get for that man the full benefits that are available to him if you stop thinking of him as a unit and start thinking of him as an energy field. And all fields react on one another. So that where this man is and how this man, this energy field, is in the larger energy field is going to determine what happens to it. Now, when I was in college, quite a number of years ago, we used to talk about a man and his environment, and the necessity of thinking of a man as something in an environment. And you see, this we have developed accidentally. We have developed the recognition of the need for the right man and the right environment in order to get the best results. That the man, as an energy field, is going to have to act in terms of the lines of energy of the energy field of the earth. And this is what makes you different from the chiropractors and the osteopaths. Those people who were very wise forerunners of Rolfing, don't downgrade them at all. They were real smart boys. They thought that the necessity was to get joints which moved freely, and they looked for joints that did not move freely and put enough pressure and enough movement in there to get free movement in the joint. But perhaps before the guy got down to the street, or perhaps because before Monday of next week came, or perhaps because before the first of next month came, it no longer moved freely. Why? Because at that point, you see, nobody was recognizing the fact that what he was really dealing with was a pair of fields of energy, and that the well-being of the man had to be looked at in terms of an energy field if you wanted to get results which had been unavailable by any of the other methods. Now, this is the story of why you're good. If you'll meditate on it, you'll get better, guaranteed. I do not know how to tell you to make this fully convincing, understanding convincing, in terms of the many, many people who come to you and say, well, what is Rolfing? Well, why is it different from chiropractic? I have just told you why it's different. Rolfing differs from chiropractic and from osteopathy because it takes into account the energy of the environment and the field around it, the environment field. Rolfing says that a man does not live alone at any point, not from the moment of conception to the moment the undertaker picks him up. He is always in a field of energy, and he is always responding to that field of energy as best he may. Now you carry this energy notion and observation a little further, and lo and behold, you recognize that you have got to see and feel that there will be centers here and there in that energy field. It can't be one large, diffuse, undifferentiated energy field. The action of a man, the look of a man, betrays the fact that they're anything but undifferentiated. So that then you have to again start digging for appropriate, significant separations in function and so forth. And you come, of course, to the recognition that you do have these various organs, each one of which has its own job to do, but each one of which is an energy field. And so lo and behold, now, if you're really taking yourself seriously, you're beginning to live in a very different world. And it is a world of energy, and it needs to be treated and thought of and manipulated. At any rate, I don't seem to be able to think of it, and at any rate, I have told you, I have passed on to you the message that I would like you to take with you and consider and think about. And if any or all of you want to argue with me about it, come on, roll up your sleeves. I bid you roll up your sleeves on various other occasions. This is a serious invitation. Because I do not see how it is possible to understand a body in the sense that we expect and believe we understand a body, except as you look at it in these energy terms. I wonder why structure then has significance. Or do I? Do you? Because you see, everything, every particle of matter, of material substance, has around it its own field of energy. Whether it be an atom, or whether it be a world, or whether it be a sun, or whether it be a star, every material bit in the universe has its own field of energy. Consequently, if you are going to get a beneficent addition of energy, of anything to anything, you have to have these fields so that they can interplay beneficently. And if you destructure that so that they cannot play beneficently, then you are in the middle of trouble. And a spoonful of boiled frog put in your mouth isn't going to get you out of it.
Keep your hopping.
Maybe you'll get a stomachache from it. But You see, what I am trying to tell you is that I believe that most of you as Rolfers do not live in this energy world. You think about it as having been taught it. That is a very different place to live than the place where you really feel yourself and see your Rolf See as a field of energy. And you see then, if what I'm saying is true, then this thing that we call structure is really the outward and relatively visible sign of the relation of particles, each one of which has its own individual energy field. And in terms of good structure, in terms of something that we need to have sturdy, in terms of the steel that we're using for building and so forth, that kind of sturdiness only comes with the appropriate structure where the energy field from one material particle reinforces the energy field of its neighbor. And this is the new world that I think might give you a lot of amusement, entertainment in your spare time when you're not rolfing, thinking about and living in. And you may even find that you have very different ideas about rolfing when you are beginning to see these various bits and pieces of the body as energy centers having their job to do in terms of energy. Now, the next logical question, which I'm not going to answer, is why is a liver different from a kidney, for example? I don't know. I mean, this is still in the unknown state. But these different fields are not unknown. They exist. You are working with them. Every time you do a really good job of rolfing, you have worked with them. You have placed them. And realize that all of this energy field that surrounds material objects demands three space. You can't have it anywhere else. You've got to have length and height and breadth. And these energy fields relate to each other in terms of distances in space, relations in space, angles of one field of energy to another field of energy in space. But always this is a relative concept. There is nothing absolute in it. It is always a relating of one thing to another thing in space. Now, I don't know. Yes, I do. I don't know quite how to make my point clearer, but in fact I do. I bid you look at that word relative, and those of you who went through my earlier classes remember that we spent probably an interesting morning one time long ago talking about how people, how men, how humans have developed ways of thinking. What has been the path through which we get from the African bushman's way of chasing a lion to the Wall Street stockbroker's way of chasing a stock? The answer, part of the answer there, you see, part of the answer of that sophistication lies in what I told you at that time. At that time, I bade you to take a look at the fact that that there are about 5 different areas into which people's ways of thinking can be divided in order to give them a better understanding of how they think. And you remember that the most primitive of those ways of dividing is how something affects you. The little girl goes down, she sticks her foot in the water, and she says, "Oh, it's cold!" And Big Brother comes along, and he's a little more sophisticated. And he says, "We'll see if it's cold. I'll get a thermometer. Let's measure it." See, it's a long step from "I feel it as cold" and his step of "let's measure it." And there has to be a great deal of sophistication that comes in between those things. And then there's a third area. And that third area is what we learned in science in high school, some colleges, where you learned absolutes about this, that, and the other. And then there's a fourth step, and that fourth step is a relativity step. A consideration of something, but always thinking about something else. Always relating it to something else, always relating the man to the environment, or something of this sort, always a step of relationship. And it took men, even pretty smart men, a long time before they came to consider ways of dealing with what they called science in this fourth relationship fashion. They have done this, as most of you know. They have done this, and nowadays it is an easy transition from the third step of looking at an object to the fourth step of relating that object to other things, the stuff that has made it, the person that's made it, where it can be bought, all the rest of the stuff that clusters around there, the relationships to this. But this is a thoroughly sophisticated way of using human minds. And then there are very few people on the face of the earth today, I think, that have ever gone beyond that. And there aren't very many ways of organizing knowledge that have gone up to it. Rolfing happens to be one of them. There aren't many. General semantics is another one. Relating the fact with all the parts which make that fact significant to what it does and where it is and what it affects you, how it affects you, and the rest of it. And as far as that fifth area is concerned, I think I'm not going to talk about it, because I think we've gotten to where we're relating. Now you see, that concept goes everywhere into the depths, the deepest depths that you can think of concerning material as well as concerning people. You get that concept of relationship. You get that concept that probably around every atom you have a field of force. And that field of force relates to the fields of force of other things. And now, lo and behold, you've got something new. And you find the same thing happening on the level of humans, on the level of human behavior, on the levels of human likes and dislikes. And then, one day you wake up to the fact that you're not thinking the same as your brothers, your sister, your mother, your father, let alone your grandfather. And then life begins to get complicated, because whenever you open your mouth, somebody misunderstands you. Because you mean something and they don't know what it is you mean. But that's all right. That's good exercise too. So this is what I have to say about relationship. I hope Mr. Toporek has this lecture down pat so he can use it too. Where is he?
Over here. I taped it so I can listen to it later.
You taped it?
Yes.
Well, the nerve of some people's children. You think I ought to forgive him? No, I don't think so either. Anyway, I don't know what more I can say to you on this subject that makes it any more significant to you, because to me it is an extremely significant concept, that it is the relationships in life which determine what you think of as units. And they're not units at all, they're relationships. And so I think I'm going to bow myself off this platform and give way to a speaker who's better than I. Where is he?
He's right here, Dr. Rolf.
He is good. Good. Come on up here. Take over. Or, wait a minute. How many of you would have questions that you'd like to have answered? Anybody? Nope. Ah, either I've been awfully good or I've been terrible.
There's one.
I have a question. You talked about Rolfing as being distinguished from any other thing by the concentration we put in on gravity.
I did?
And I do have friends who are chiropractors who are really concerned with gravity.
If at the end of all these 30 or 40 years of Rolfing, the word gravity hasn't gotten around, there's something wrong with people's ears. I'll guarantee you that 30 years ago they would not have been concerned with gravity. Ideas are born and live and reach maturity. Hopefully this has not reached maturity. Hopefully we're still in a young stage, because many other things may come out of it. And I am not damning chiropractors. I like them, I believe in them, I honor them, and they're much better people to have around in an accident than a Rolfer. So when you get to an accident, stay away from the Rolfers and go to the chiropractor. You can go back to your Rolfer when your chiropractor tells you, well, that's all I can do for you. Okay, someone else?
Dr. Rolf, I wonder what will happen to some future children who are born on a space station, say, where there's not the same kind
Man, I don't know anything about it. I'm awfully sorry, I'm not a good fiction artist. Most of the stuff that comes out of my mouth I have relatively good authority for. So I don't know. Anyway, we'll find out. Yeah?
Following the idea of centers and relationships and integrating polarity ideas, would you comment on the possibilities if this were going to be Rolf, having a second Rolfer on the opposite end of the body that is the relationship at the second center, and Rolfing both centers at the same time?
What are you going to charge them, $100 a treatment?
Well, that's what the Rochelle Feldenkrais charges, $100 for half an hour.
Well, good for Feldenkrais. I have never gotten into that class. I don't want to see this thing get to the place where all the thousands of, for example, university students can't afford it.
Well, but his $100 is equivalent to $1,000 worth of exercise for me, in fact.
That's what he says, but I'll guarantee that my $50 worth of Rolfing is equal to $1,000 worth of exercise too.
Well, I gave you a letter a few minutes ago, which I said the same thing.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to speak to you individually at the end of this, if you don't mind, come on up. So, what else can we talk about here? Are there more questions about this?
Any more questions? Bill?
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit more about that fifth stage of thinking, if you don't mind, or if you can't.
Well, I do mind. I don't want to confuse it now, because that fifth stage then rapidly goes into another level. And I have delivered the message to Garsha here, now, and that's it.
Who's Garsha?
You haven't found Garsha yet?
No. First time I heard of him, or her.
No fooling, really.
Garsha online?
Let's have let's thank Dr. Rolf.